Receive this ring, a symbol of royal dignity.
It's a huge pleasure to be with you all once again.
So I have since really enjoyed going, particularly I've grown to appreciate just the quality as well as the traditions. And
a royal bombshell has reportedly dropped. Princess Anne just took a bold step that stunned even the inner circle. Camilla's royal title is gone, and her reaction might say more than any press release ever could. Is this the end of her reign? Stay tuned and be sure to hit that subscribe button. It started like any other formal royal event, an elegant venue, flashing cameras, and carefully arranged smiles. Camilla stepped out onto the red carpet, dressed in full regalia, clearly expecting her usual royal welcome. Her posture was confident, her expression practiced. This wasn't her first gala. She had perfected this performance over the years. Then the moment arrived. The host stepped forward, adjusted the microphone, and began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Cornwall. The pause in the room was instant. A wave of surprise rippled through the audience like a gust of wind. There had been no mistake, no stutter, just a title, one that hadn't been used in years. Cameras zoomed in. Camilla froze. Her smile faltered. She looked to Charles, who appeared equally stunned. It wasn't just awkward, it was deliberate, a statement disguised as a ceremonial slip-up. And just like that, the crown she thought she had secured seemed to vanish with one line. No grand declaration, no announcement, just silence, and the unmistakable signal that something monumental had shifted inside the palace. The press caught it instantly. Viewers at home paused, rewound, and gasped. Commentators whispered behind the scenes, but most importantly, all eyes turned toward one name, Princess Anne. What had she done? And more importantly, why? To most of the public, Princess Anne and Queen Camilla kept up appearances. Handshakes, nods, and the occasional forced smile were all anyone ever saw. But insiders have whispered for years that underneath the surface, the two women were anything but allies. Their story stretches back decades, back to a time when Diana was still the face of royal grace. Princess Anne, known for her no-nonsense demeanor and dedication to duty, didn't welcome Diana's entry with open arms at first. She thought Diana was too emotionally driven, too caught up in media attention. But over time, Anne changed her view. She came to see that Diana brought something the monarchy had long been missing: authenticity, heart, and a connection to the people. But then came the revelation of Charles and Camilla's long-standing relationship. It wasn't just a personal betrayal in Anne's eyes. It was a betrayal of tradition. While Queen Elizabeth eventually accepted Camilla, Anne never fully did. She kept her distance, attended events, but avoided warmth. There were no shared laughs or casual moments, just formality. Anne saw herself as a guardian of the crown's values: discipline, duty, and loyalty. To her, Camilla represented disruption, a new face trying to reshape an ancient system. Their Cold War didn't involve arguments or headlines. It involved posture, tone, and silence. Still, Camilla climbed the ranks. She became queen consort, but Anne never stopped watching. And apparently, she never forgot what had been lost along the way. So what changed now? What finally pushed Anne to act? Behind palace doors, Camilla had reportedly begun making moves that some saw as overstepping her role. At first, it was subtle. Slight changes in seating arrangements at events, adjustments to ceremonial orders, requests for her family to be more visible at royal functions. Small things, but in the monarchy, small things carry weight. Sources say Camilla advocated for her children, Tom and Laura, to be seen not just as relatives, but as participants in royal planning. There were discussions, allegedly, of Tom taking on an advisory role within the palace, a position that would put him in contact with senior aides and influence future events. That's when Anne's patience wore thin. To Anne, royal privilege wasn't something you could inherit through marriage. It had to be earned through sacrifice and service. Allowing Camilla's children into the fold didn't just bend the rules, it shattered them. And it wasn't just the children. Camilla reportedly pushed for precedence changes, shifting who entered first, who sat where, and who stood nearest to the monarch at official events. These weren't mere formalities. In royal culture, those placements reflect hierarchy and respect. Anne allegedly saw all of this as a calculated effort to rewrite history, to plant Camilla's legacy deeper into the monarchy, possibly even ahead of those born into royal blood. It wasn't the idea of modernization that upset Anne, it was what she believed was being sacrificed to achieve it. When Princess Anne requested a private gathering at Balmoral Castle, people noticed. Anne didn't call meetings. She followed orders, kept tradition, and did her part in silence. So when she asked for an urgent family meeting, the palace paid attention. Charles arrived looking drained. Camilla arrived composed but alert. A handful of senior aides joined them in one of the smaller, quiet rooms tucked away from the castle's grand corridors. Anne didn't raise her voice. She didn't gesture. She simply presented facts, emails, actions, requests, each piece laid out like evidence in a case. Camilla's efforts to restructure power within the monarchy weren't framed as opinions. They were backed by documentation, witnesses, and precedents. Camilla reportedly responded with disbelief. Charles tried to intervene, pleading for understanding. "She's my wife," he said. "She's the queen." Anne's response was cold and final. "She may be your wife, Charles, but she's not the queen our mother intended." With that, Anne issued a formal directive. Camilla would no longer be introduced as queen in any royal event where Charles was not present. She would revert to her previous title, Duchess of Cornwall. Camilla, stunned, left the room in silence. And Charles sat there speechless, caught between loyalty to his spouse and the legacy of his family. The balance had shifted, not with a grand announcement, but with a signed paper and a closed door. A few days later, Camilla appeared at a charity gala, an event she had attended many times before. Her dress was impeccable, her tiara gleamed under the lights, and the cameras were ready to capture every second. The announcer took the stage, smiled at the crowd, and said, "Please welcome Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Cornwall." The room didn't gasp loudly, it went still. Camilla's expression changed for just a moment. But that moment was enough. Her eyes widened slightly, her posture stiffened, and she turned toward the announcer with confusion. Charles at her side looked equally caught off guard. But it was no mistake. Event programs had already been printed with the updated title. Palace aides scrambled behind the scenes, trying to explain it away as a clerical error. But no one believed that. It was a public gesture of private punishment, and it had been executed flawlessly. Within hours, social media exploded. Photos of Camilla's frozen expression were plastered across headlines. The words "Duchess" again trended. Commentators dissected the moment frame by frame, but the real shift didn't happen online. It happened within the palace. A single phrase had undone years of calculated assent, and everyone knew exactly who had given the order. Behind the grand facade of Clarence House, the mood had shifted dramatically. Camilla returned from the gala event in near silence. Normally, she would speak with aides about the press coverage, review footage, and plan her next engagement. But this time, nothing. Her shoes clicked softly on the marble floor as she walked past stunned staff. Not a glance, not a word, just the weight of realization dragging behind her. The moment her heels crossed the threshold of her private sitting room, the composure snapped. Those close to her said they had never seen anything like it. Camilla, always poised, always collected, reportedly erupted into a wave of disbelief and fury. The silence of the palace was quickly replaced with the sound of raised voices and shattering glass. A crystal tumbler thrown against the fireplace. A framed portrait of her and Charles from the coronation knocked face down. Her personal assistant reportedly tried to approach but was waved off instantly. She wasn't just angry, she was blindsided, humiliated in front of dignitaries, in front of Charles, and worst of all, in front of the world. This wasn't a scandal leaked by tabloids or a rumor on social media. It wasn't something that could be dismissed as gossip or mischief. It happened on stage, in real time, with the cameras rolling and the microphones live. There was no undoing it. Camilla's voice, according to palace insiders, trembled at first. Then it roared. "How dare she?" she allegedly screamed, referring, of course, to Princess Anne. "How dare Anne humiliate me like this in front of everyone?" She paced back and forth, repeating the phrase. At one point, she reportedly sat down, buried her face in her hands, and wept. Something no one had seen from her since the most difficult days of media backlash decades ago. But this wasn't just about being embarrassed. This was about being erased. After years of slowly clawing her way into acceptance, from being the quiet partner, to the controversial companion, to finally being addressed as queen, Camilla had believed she'd made it. That her past had been folded into a new royal narrative. That she had rewritten the public perception. Now it felt like it had all crumbled in 30 seconds. She demanded an explanation. Who approved that script? Who printed that title? Staff scrambled. Some claimed it was a clerical error, others mumbled about outdated templates. But Camilla wasn't buying any of it. She was too experienced to believe this wasn't deliberate. Someone somewhere had given a direct order to remove the title Queen from the public script, and she already knew who. Princess Anne. Camilla's fury slowly morphed into paranoia. She questioned everyone: secretaries, aides, public relations officers. Was someone leaking information? Had Anne spoken directly to the event coordinator? Was this an internal setup? In royal circles, trust is a delicate thing, and once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to restore. For Charles, who arrived a few hours later, the tension was immediate. He reportedly entered the room with a soft voice. "Darling, we'll sort this out. It was probably a mistake." But Camilla wasn't interested in soothing. She wanted justice. Her voice cracked as she lashed out, not at Charles directly, but at the system. "I've done everything right. I've attended every meeting. I smiled when I was told to. I've backed you through every criticism. And this is what I get?" Charles stood there, caught between heartbreak and helplessness. He knew Anne well. He understood that Anne didn't act rashly. She didn't stir drama or chase the spotlight. If Anne had taken this step, she had come prepared, with justification, evidence, and the confidence to stand alone if needed. He also knew Camilla wasn't wrong to feel betrayed. She had spent years trying to serve, trying to soften her image, trying to fit into a world that never quite made room for her. And just when she thought she'd arrived at full acceptance, she was pulled back without warning. But Charles had no answer to offer, no formal apology, no correction to make, because deep down, he knew this wasn't about one event or one title. This was the result of years of unresolved tension, quietly boiling beneath the surface. Camilla reportedly isolated herself after the confrontation. For 2 days, she barely left her private chambers. Meals were sent to her quarters, meetings were rescheduled. Even her most loyal staff were told to give her space. During that time, whispers filled the corridors of Clarence House. Some said she was drafting letters. Others claimed she was preparing a statement. A few believed she was urging Charles to reverse the decision publicly. But none of that happened. Camilla remained still, quiet, processing not just what had been taken from her, but what it meant for her future. And perhaps most painfully, she came to a realization. She had no allies left inside the palace walls. The Queen Mother had once said, "In the royal family, you either endure or you disappear." Camilla had endured for decades, but now she felt that endurance wearing thin. When she finally emerged from her rooms, she wasn't the same. Her stride was slower, her tone is softer, the defiance had dulled into reflection. She walked past the staff, gave a faint smile, and asked for tea, not from the kitchen, but from the drawing room where she and Charles once celebrated her elevation to Queen Consort. This wasn't just a physical return, it was symbolic, a quiet acceptance that the title she once held had shifted, if not legally, then spiritually. Meanwhile, aides close to Charles described him as being in emotional limbo. He was deeply affected, not just by his wife's pain, but by the sudden clarity that had been forced upon him. Camilla's place in the royal story was no longer guaranteed, and Anne's move had forced him to confront what kind of monarch he wanted to be, one driven by personal loyalty or one bound by legacy. For Charles, it was an impossible dilemma. Any public effort to reinstate Camilla's title would spark internal rebellion, not just from Anne, but likely from William, Catherine, and other key royal advisors. And doing nothing, that would leave Camilla feeling abandoned, discarded, and publicly demoted without defense. The pressure was relentless. Charles reportedly spent long hours in his private library, rereading letters from his mother, reviewing historical precedents, and holding hushed conversations with senior aides. He was torn between love and responsibility, between his present and the institution's future. And all of it began, not with scandal or scandalous headlines, but with one sentence, one title, one announcement that changed everything. From that point on, Clarence House was never quite the same. Camilla's role became more ceremonial than strategic. Her requests were filtered through advisors, her influence in planning events diminished. She still smiled, still waved, but the warmth had faded from her expressions. She was no longer ascending. She was holding the ground, carefully, quietly. As for Anne, she remained absent from Clarence House. No visits, no follow-ups. Her message had been delivered, and she had no intention of softening it with explanations. It was royal life as Anne believed it should be, unemotional, direct, and bound by duty. Camilla had tried to rewrite her story. Anne had turned the final page. While media houses scrambled to dissect what had happened and social media buzzed with speculation, Princess Anne remained silent. Not a single statement, not a single offhand comment. She showed up to her engagements, nodded to reporters, and let the weight of her actions settle like fog over the palace. But those paying attention understood something had changed, subtly, permanently. Behind the scenes, Anne's authority was already reverberating through the institution. Courtiers who had once dismissed her stoic demeanor now fell in line with her sense of order. There were no long memos, no new mission statements, just updates, real structural changes. The public title of Queen Camilla was erased from official programs. Palace spokespersons were quietly instructed to revert to Duchess of Cornwall in public-facing events when Charles was absent. The change was clean, methodical, and swift. For those unfamiliar with the inner workings of royal protocol, it might have seemed like semantics. A name change, a label. But within the royal household, titles are power. They indicate status, respect, and sometimes who gets to speak before whom. Anne hadn't just taken a word away. She had drawn a boundary, one that Camilla could no longer cross without consequence. What made Anne's approach so impactful wasn't just her timing, it was her legacy. She didn't gain her influence through charm or strategic alliances. She had earned it over 50 years of unwavering service. No scandals, no complaints, just duty, discipline, and loyalty to the institution above all. Even as a child, Anne had been regarded as the most traditional of Elizabeth's children. She was expected to serve, not shine. While Charles took on philosophical duties and his brothers drew headlines, Anne stayed the course. Military charities, global humanitarian efforts, representing the Queen in over 100 countries. No fanfare, no flash, just consistency. And now, when the monarchy found itself at a crossroads, divided between legacy and ambition, Anne stepped forward not with noise, but with control. Her victory, if it can be called that, wasn't just about humbling Camilla. It was about restoring balance, making it clear that the crown couldn't be bent by personal influence or emotional leverage. In Anne's world, the crown was sacred, a burden, not a prize. She didn't seek applause, she didn't expect praise. But for those inside the palace, one thing was crystal clear. Anne had reasserted control without uttering a single sentence to the press. And the ripple effects were only just beginning. Camilla's title reversal wasn't just a personal setback. It signaled a broader shift in royal philosophy. And the impact of that moment didn't stop at her doorstep. It swept through the entire royal hierarchy, forcing everyone to reevaluate their place, their role, and their influence. One of the most striking aspects of this event was the silence of Prince William and Princess Catherine. They didn't speak out publicly. They didn't leak supportive messages to the press. But that silence spoke louder than any statement, because when it came time to choose between upholding tradition or defending Camilla, they chose the crown. According to sources close to the family, William had long been wary of Camilla's growing power. Her involvement in state affairs, her reported push to promote her own family, and her subtle attempts to mold the monarchy's image didn't go unnoticed. As the future king, William understood what was at stake. And while he never openly clashed with Camilla, he didn't shield her from the consequences either. Behind closed doors, William reportedly sent his father a single message after the Balmoral incident. It read, "We must protect the crown, not personalities." It was simple, unemotional, but deeply telling. For Charles, this created a complex situation. As a husband, his instinct was to defend Camilla. As a monarch, his duty was to preserve the legacy he had inherited. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. Camilla's presence had not unified the family, it had fractured it further. And now that even his closest allies were pulling away, he found himself isolated in his own reign. Publicly, Charles tried to maintain balance. He kept his official schedule, stood by Camilla during appearances, and avoided addressing the title change. But behind the scenes, those around him noticed a shift. He was more introspective, less assertive, quietly contemplating not just how to respond, but whether he even should. Meanwhile, Camilla's role continued to shrink. Not officially, of course. She still appeared beside Charles at state banquets, still attended the events marked on her calendar. But the warmth had faded, the spotlight was dimmed. Where once she commanded headlines, now she was a supporting figure, present but not centered. Palace insiders say she felt the change deeply. There were no speeches or protests, but her demeanor said it all. Once spirited and commanding, she now walked with more caution. Her staff reduced their media requests. Her public statements became less frequent, and her name slowly slipped from the royal narrative. More importantly, the public's focus shifted toward William, Catherine, and their children, the next generation, the ones who would carry the crown into the future. It wasn't just about popularity, it was about alignment. William and Catherine understood the values Anne had enforced: duty over drama, legacy over leverage, and they embraced them fully. Public appearances from the young royals began to carry more symbolic weight. Catherine's speeches gained stronger reception. William's quiet leadership started to resemble his grandmother's steadfastness. Even young Prince George began accompanying them to more events, a gentle signal of the new era being formed. Meanwhile, Anne's role expanded subtly, not with new titles, but with reverence. Her counsel was sought more frequently. Her presence at events, once overlooked, was now seen as grounding. And yet, Anne remained unchanged, still resistant to publicity, still focused on preserving what she believed the crown stood for. Her influence wasn't loud, but it was undeniably present. This realignment inside the palace sent a clear message to the world. The future of the monarchy would not be built on sympathy or headlines. It would be built on steadiness, legacy, and earned respect. Camilla's title reversal became a moment of reckoning, not just for her, but for the entire royal family. It forced them to confront uncomfortable truths, reestablish boundaries, and decide who among them was fit to lead not just in title, but in principle. And if recent events are any indication, that future no longer revolves around Camilla. It revolves around William, Catherine, and the values Princess Anne stood up to defend. What began as a routine event ended in a silent earthquake. Camilla, once crowned in grandeur, found herself quietly stripped of the titles she had worked so hard to claim. And it wasn't the press or public that did it. It was Anne, unshaken, unreadable, and utterly precise. She didn't act out of revenge. She acted out of responsibility. In her mind, the monarchy had lost its center. Her mother's legacy was at risk, and someone had to draw the line. That someone was her. Now the royal family faces a future reshaped not by conflict, but by quiet recalibration, a return to structure, to service, to substance over image. But the question lingers. Was this a bold defense of tradition, or a sign that the crown is still struggling to find its footing? Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you stand with Princess Anne's decision, or do you believe Camilla deserved to keep her title? And if you want more dramatic royal twists, stories of hidden power, and behind-the-scenes revelations, hit that subscribe button, because the crown may be heavy, but the stories behind it are even heavier.